Well, hello YouTubers, and welcome back to the whole special channel and another lathe discombobulation. Today we're going to make a bar stool seat, like right here, on this old Gustloff lathe here from 1938 or 30, no, it would be from 1940, somewhere in there. This is a lathe out of war production, World War II Germany. And so we got to make some bar stools. And so first what I did is I made an arbor for it to mount the wood here on the lathe and be able to turn it. So anyway, the other thing that I wanted to mention about this is cottonwood, so it's very soft, and doing this kind of work, or this kind of turning on a lathe, or on a metal lathe I should say, is fraught with extreme hazards. So unless you really know what you're doing when it comes to wood turning, I don't recommend doing this. It was quite the adventure, to say the least, but you know, these bar stools didn't have to, they're for the shop here, and they didn't really have to be, you know, picture perfect. They just have to fulfill a function, and so this is how I wound up going about doing it. So the other thing I forgot to mention, or need to mention, is I started working with a new camera, and I didn't have a tripod for some of the footage, you know, attaching the workpiece to the arbor. So I do apologize if the angles are less than optimal. Just one of those things I just had to, you know, do it on the fly, and so I set the camera down on the table and hoped that I could get enough in the frame to where you guys could see what was going on. So anyway, if there's, you know, any gripes about it, again, I do apologize. So anyway, moving on. So here's how we're going to set this all up. Now, as you can see, this is pretty sketchy. What I wound up doing is in the tool rest, or not in the tool rest, the tool holder, is I put a round bar in. Now, the one thing I do have to say here, if you use a piece of square stock, for the initial bar stool I used a piece of square stock, and that wasn't all that great. It clamped in fine, it held fine, but the problem is, with your chisel, your turning chisel, it should be on a rounded rod, and that's so that you can actually hold down and slide back and forth optimally with your hand, because you're going to be cutting into the ball of your hand on a square stock, and it has a tendency to bounce more as well. So there's going to be some cavitation there that you otherwise wouldn't get in a round bar. So anyway, here's how we're going to mount that all up. So as you can see, we just turned it around and went from one side to the other, and voila, Bob's your uncle, and we got ourselves a bar stool seat. Well, YouTubers, that's a wrap for another episode of discombobulating the lathe. I do apologize for the cattywampus and wonky camera angles and lack of footage in some places where it should have been, like the making of the arbor. The arbor itself was just, you know, a straightforward job. Drilled a hole through a piece of plate steel, put a step shoulder in the bore, welded it, chucked it up, planed it off. Bob's your uncle. You know, of course, I've drilled the holes in before for the mounting screws before I you know, weld the rod in. Otherwise, you have a hard time getting your quill past this length of rod. I mean, I could have made it a lot shorter. This is overkill. If this rod is 4 inches long, plenty long enough to get it put in the chuck. So I just used what I had floating around the shop, and you know, like I said, I just grabbed this and stuck it in there. Bob's your uncle. So anyway, I hope you guys got a little something out of this episode of discombobulating the lathe. This is just a demonstration to show that in a pinch you can do certain woodworking jobs on metalworking machinery. So do I recommend it? No. If you're going to do lots of wood turning, you should get yourself a dedicated machine for that purpose. It's just not optimal. You don't have the RPM range that you need for wood. You need a lot more RPMs and higher cutting speeds for your wood tools than you do for metal cutting tools. So that's why I don't really recommend doing this as a habit. So with that, hope you guys got a little something out of it. And if you have any thoughts, comments, suggestions, experiences you'd like to share in that field, by all means, put it in the comment section below. And you know, it's always good to get some of that feedback from the viewership, and also it helps the ratings in YouTube. Their algorithms are something, you know, they're somewhat cattywampus. I went and looked for a video that I recently did at my brother's house, and it was so far buried. I had to go and do a specific search for it under my channel in order to get to it. Just doing a search for Idaho yielded me all kinds of other crazy crap that I wasn't looking for. I flipped through probably 300 videos and still couldn't find it. So the more interactions that a video gets, the higher it climbs in the ratings, and of course the channel does as well. So it would be greatly appreciated if anything that, you know, a thought, suggestion, comment, experience, you know, share it with the rest of the viewership, that if you guys put it in the comments. So with that, thanks for stopping by, and we'll see y'all again soon.